All right, so how did I edit this photograph? Well, I started with the raw, and the raw pretty much I had the XT3 on a compressed raw, so that I could get as much you know dynamic range as I can, using the raw file of the XT3 or the Fuji, and using the Adobe RGB color space. And how I started with this is basically simple. I go through the profile, and with this we had the lamp right here, that was already in there when I get into the to the groom prep. So what struck me, not struck me, but what had my attention with is the light. So it's a simple lamp light, and I said, oh, what are we gonna do with this light? Maybe we can use it as an accent light, maybe a hair light or whatsoever. So it happened that the groom tuxedo is gray, and it gives that reflection, and a little bit shiny. It gives a lot more reflections from the way the light falls into the groom's tuxedo. So obviously this is a window, so this is the key light, and there's quite a lot of a light that you can capture having facing the groom over here. But what I like the most is that the drop of this this lamp to the groom's tuxedo, and also a little bit of over here at his jawbone, and to the ear, and as well as the hair. So maybe without this light, this image would be less interesting, right? So it gives more a three-dimensional when you add an accent light, another light on the side, so that way the photograph of the groom would pop out. So that's what my thought is, and this is a very simple post. We started off with just a simple chair, but we saw this Ottoman, and I said, what, let's move this chair. Maybe this is a better chair, obviously, than the than just a regular chair. So so there you go. This is how we've positioned him, and the way the lighting goes, so it gives more 3D effects to it. So how did I process it? So let me tell you what. The way I process this is I play around with the clarity. Okay, so you dial it up to get more a 3D effects into the image. And what I like about the most with Fuji is that you don't need to mess around with the skin, because the skin tone, and for the most part we're shooting people shots, weddings, school portraits, and to me personally, Fuji has the best colors, color rendition when it comes to a portrait. And that's what I like the most about picking up a Fuji camera, because of the skin tone that captures it. So the another thing is the way I edited this is through the shadows. When I had the shadows, it usually started off this way, the way it was shot, but upping the shadows this way, it actually gives a lot more range. And look at this, how dynamic the dynamic range is. So this is like the 1DX that I have, and the dynamic range is so wide in terms of the shadows. And it's amazing how this camera works. And this is how zero shadow is, and this is all the way to 100% plus. So I usually what I have been taught is that I have to shoot underexposed. That way I could pretty much dial the shadows up and down, and I have that range to do that adjustment. But again, having this camera and the way the dynamic range works is amazing. So there you go. So that's playing around with the shadows and a little bit of exposure. Maybe we've shot it a little bit brighter on the side, on where the key light is, where the window is. So we have to tone down the brightness a little bit. There you go. There's maybe to -15. Contrast, as I up the shadows, I have to sometimes lessen the contrast, so I have to up the contrast. That way I can give my subject a lot more 3D dimensional effects. There you go. So it depends on your taste. Again, like what I said, dehaze, I don't touch the saturation anymore. More of the clarity, and the highlights is another thing that you want to dial into. The white contrast, the white adjustment, you might want to also dial. It's nice to play around with this when you have like a white walls or the lamp or any white fabric or garments. Sometimes you need to dial this and tone it down. So but this is the profile that I've chosen, the Adobe landscape. For this one, you could obviously choose Adobe, maybe Vivid, depending on your style that you want. This is just my preset that I have chosen within the Camera Raw, Adobe Camera Raw. And to me, I think the landscape fits my vision on this type of camera, that type of picture. So I opened this up to the Photoshop, and and from there I removed this part right here, because to me it seems to be like a distraction. So also this part right here, I removed that because again, and also crop this part because this part right here again is a distraction. So when you post or when you present your project to the client, you have to look at the environment to make sure that you don't have any distractions, and the focus is again just for your subject when you do portrait. That way there's not much of distraction, but the eye of the viewer would just focus on the subject itself. So again, you could also do post crop, vignetting if you like, but to me, I guess this is good to go already, and this is how I've shot it, and that's how I think my vision is on this type of picture. So again, I'm very happy with how the Fuji and my adapter, I'm using my old Canon or existing Canon primes and zooms, and not only the Canon but the Sigma zooms, 1.8 and 18 to 35, and how the Fuji color rendition process. So there you go. This is my thoughts on this one.